Good morning, boys and girls. This is Miss Amy, and I am here to read Chapter 6 from School Days According to Humphrey. Chapter 6 is titled Shake, Wiggle, and Spin. Mrs. Brisbane left, and the room grew dark over time. Then suddenly the door opened and the lights came on again. Hello, mammal. Hello, amphibian. Aldo's voice boomed out as he rolled his cleaning cart into the room. Hello yourself, I squeaked back, even though I didn't know what he was talking about. Last year, he'd learned Spanish. Was he learning another language? Humphrey, you and I are mammals, but Og is an amphibian, he explained as he started to sweep the room. I learned that in biology. I loved to watch Aldo sweep. He was so graceful as he whirled the broom around the tables and under the chairs, straightening them as he went. See, humans and rodents like you, Humphrey, are mammals. We all have fur and ears that we can see, and four limbs. We're also warm blooded, he said. I knew we had a lot in common, I said. I was unsqueakably glad that Aldo and I were both mammals. Most humans are not as furry as hamsters, but Aldo was an extra furry human, especially with his great big mustache. Og, you're an amphibian, he continued. You don't have any fur or hair, and you've got webbed feet. Also, we can't see your ears. That was true. I'd been looking for Og's ears for as long as I had known him, but I still couldn't see them. You're also cold blooded, Og. Aldo got out his rag and started dusting the tables, which means your body temperature goes up and down, while warm blooded creatures like Humphrey and me have the same temperature no matter what the weather. Boy, Aldo is sure going to make a great teacher someday. I was kind of sorry that Og and I didn't have much in common until Aldo said, I think amphibians are just as nice as mammals. Don't you, Humphrey? Yes, 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 I answered. Og let out a giant boing. A little later, Aldo stopped to eat his dinner and talk to us. He always gave us yummy treats. Well, my treats were yummy, but Og's didn't look too tasty to me. However, he's an amphibian and I'm not. While he ate his sandwich, Aldo told us something very interesting. Richie's still having trouble getting used to his new teacher. Aldo paused to take a gulp of coffee from his thermos. He was kind of upset because Miss Becker, moved him away from Kirk. He should probably thank her for that, because when he sits near Kirk, he usually gets in trouble, Aldo said. I knew Aldo was right. Kirk liked to tell jokes, and Richie liked to laugh at them. None of the strange students told jokes, so far, anyways. She had to separate Gail and Heidi, too, Aldo told us. I could understand that because they were best friends. Gail was a great giggler, and Heidi always giggled when she was around her. None of the strange students giggled like Gail, not even her brother Simon. Anyway, Richie will get used to her, Aldo said, just like he got used to Mrs. Brisbane. It had taken me quite a while to get used to Mrs. Brisbane, and she was just one human being. How long would it take me to get used to a whole room full of strangers? Aldo rose and started pushing his cart toward the door. I think Richie's real problem is that they don't have a classroom pet in room 18. Aldo turned off the light. See you tomorrow night. I was a little disappointed when he walked right past Aki's red hamster ball on Mrs. Brisbane's desk and didn't turn it on. When the door was closed and my eyes got used to the darkness, I had an idea. Did he say room 18, Og? I asked my neighbor. Boing, Og replied. That must be where the rest of our old friends are now. I'd sure like to see that room. I was already pushing on the lock that doesn't lock. I'll tell you all about it when I get back. Soon I was out in the hallway. I knew that room 18 wasn't to the left of room 26, so I turned right and scurried down the hall. It had those dim lights to guide me, but a school with no children in it is unsqueakably quiet. It was hard to see the numbers on the doors from way down low, but if I looked straight up, I could read them. Just like the night before, all the even numbers were on the one side of the hallway and all the odd numbers were on the other side. So I read them: 24, 23, 22, 21, 20. I ran out of hallway before I got to room 18, so I took a sharp left turn and the hallway continued. There was room 19 and across from it, room 18. I was a little nervous about sliding under an unfamiliar door after I'd gotten stuck, but this time the gap between the door and the floor was nice and wide. Phew! Room 18 didn't look at all that different from room 26. There were tables and chairs, chalkboards, and a teacher's desk. There was even a long table by the window, like the one where my cage in Og's tank sits. But instead of mammals and amphibians on the table, there was a neat row of boxes, each labeled with a name. I skittered across the floor to get a better look and saw the names of some of my good friends from last year: Gail and Heidi, AJ and Richie, Kirk and Tabitha, along with names I'd never seen before. I stared at those boxes for a long time, remembering all the good times I'd had last year. Then suddenly lights began to flash. My insides did a flip flop. Was someone in the building? Was it Aldo? Or had someone broken in? Why were there flashing lights? Boom! There was a loud crash. Someone was breaking in for sure. There was a tremendous clatter, and my insides settled down a bit as I realized that it was raining outside. The flashing lights and crashing sounds were lightning and thunder. I hurried back out into the hallway and back to room 26. Of course, I wasn't afraid, but I was worried that Og might be. Don't worry, Og, it's just a thunderstorm. It won't hurt you, I assured my friend when I was safely back in my cage. I told him about the boxes in room 18 and the names on them. Maybe it made Og sad to think of his old friends so far away. He didn't make a sound, so for the rest of the night, I sat in my cage and listened to the rain. It was still raining the next morning, but the lightning and thunder had stopped, thank goodness. The students arrived in room 26 with an assortment of umbrellas, raincoats, and hats, which were put in the cloakroom. I was glad to have a nice dry cage to stay in, especially since hamsters shouldn't ever get wet. Just Joey rushed out of the cloakroom and hurried over to my cage. Hi, Humphrey, he said. It's me, Joey. I know you're Joey, I squeaked. He laughed. You answered me. Of course, I said. I'm a very polite hamster. I wish he could understand what I said. Humphrey, I had a hamster once. His name was Giggles because he made little sounds that kind of sounded like giggles, he said. What happened to him? I asked. I don't have him anymore. Joey suddenly looked sad. He D-I-E-D. I guess he thought I couldn't spell, but I knew what D-I-E-D meant. I wanted another hamster, but my parents got me a dog instead, he explained. Skipper. I like Skipper. Okay. I love him. but still think about good old Giggles. Of course you do. He was your friend, I said. I'm unsqueakably sorry. Now you're giggling too, said Joey. His face lit up. I like that. Well, I hadn't mean to giggle, but I was happy if I made Joey feel better. When Joey ran off to join his friends, I told myself that whenever he was near my cage, I was going to giggle. I climbed up to my tree branch all the way to the tippy top of my cage. More students came in looking damp and drippy. Boy, that thunder last night was so loud it shook the house and all our pictures fell down, Thomas announced when he arrived. Even my teeth shook. Thomas T. True, is that really true? Mrs. Brisbane asked. Thomas shrugged. That's what it felt like anyway. When Mrs. Brisbane took attendance, Harry was missing again. She shook her head when she read his name, but he finally showed up in the middle of reading. Did you get an excuse from the office? Mrs. Brisbane asked. Harry reached into his pocket and pulled out the slip of paper. Dad drove me and we got caught in traffic, he said. I thought that makes sense on a very wet day, and Mrs. Brisbane didn't say anything. Harry went into the cloakroom to hang up his jacket. The other students kept on reading, but Harry didn't come out of the cloakroom, so Mrs. Brisbane went back to check on him. The cloakroom isn't really a room, but it's partially walled off from the rest of the room, and I can't see inside from my spot on the window. Harry, what are you doing? She asked. Just taking off my jacket, I heard him answer. Well, hurry up, Harry, she said in a not very happy voice. Harry came out with a grin on his face. Mrs. Brisbane, did you know that 8 of the jackets back there are blue? Way more than any other color. Mrs. Brisbane just said, Take your seat, Harry. We're in the middle of class. The rain was still beating against the windows when the bell rang for recess, so my friends had to stay inside. Mrs. Brisbane opened the closet and pulled out a huge plastic tub. Here's my rainy day box, she said. The things in here can only be used on days like this. She started taking out smaller boxes and lining them up on the desk. We've got board games and puzzles, art supplies and activity books. It's strictly first come, first serve, no arguments. Now, first, let's get the wiggles out a little. Then the most amazing thing happened. Mrs. Brisbane stretched her arms way up over her head and wiggled her fingers. Stretch and wiggle, she said. Most of the students stood up. Rosie managed to stretch and wiggle right in her wheelchair. I put my paws up on the side of my cage and stretched too. I wiggled my whiskers at the same time. None of the other students could do that. Next, Mrs. Brisbane started rolling her head around. Wiggle your heads. The students did. They all looked pretty silly, but I tried it too. Wiggle your shoulders, she continued. Wiggle your arms. I wasn't sure about my shoulders and arms, so I just wiggled everything. Wiggle your hips, she said. Wiggle your knees. I've never seen Mrs. Brisbane act so unsqueakably silly before. The students were wiggling like crazy, and they were giggling too. Wiggle your toes, wiggle your nose. Mrs. Brisbane even giggled at that one. I'm very good at wiggling my nose. I've had a lot of practice. And now shake. Mrs. Brisbane shook her whole body. Shake your problems away. The kids shook their bodies and laughed out loud. Okay, settle down, Mrs. Brisbane said. Now that the wiggles are over, you may come up and pick out a rainy day activity. The students all headed toward the desk, including Rosie. That's okay, Rosie, Holly said, stopping her. I'll pick something out. Thanks, but I'd like to choose my own, Rosie said, rolling right past Holly. Simon was the first at the desk, and he grabbed a board game. Who wants to play this game with me? He said. Small Paul and Tall Paul both came forward and said, Me. Hey, Paul comes in two sizes, giant and miniature, Simon joked. The two Pauls didn't think it was funny. Neither did I. They both backed away. Never mind, Small Paul said, and he headed back to his table and took out a book. Og, did you see that? I squeaked. Og splashed around in his tank. Thomas decided to play the game with Tall Paul and Simon, and Rosie joined them. Holly raced up and said she'd like to play too. Simon checked out the box. Sorry, only 4 can play. First come, first serve. Holly looked disappointed until Kelsey asked her to work on a puzzle with her. Phoebe grabbed art supplies and was busy gluing things to bright pieces of paper, and Joey joined her. By the time Hurry Up Harry got up to the desk, there wasn't much left in the box. Are you feeling all right, Harry? Miss Brisbane asked. I'm fine, he said. You know, she continued, if you could be on time at school for a whole week, maybe you could be the first student to take Humphrey home for the weekend. Would you like that? Harry nodded. Yes, would I? Yes. It's up to you to listen for the bell to return with the other students. I want you back in the room right after recess. She reached deep in the box and pulled out a smaller box. Now, why don't you see if Paul F. would like to play this game with you? Okay, said Harry. Soon all the students were busy with their activities and seemed to be having fun, which was a good thing. But there were problems too. I wondered if Harry could hurry up for a whole week. I could see there was a problem between Holly and Rosie. I could see there was a problem between the two Pauls as well. I hopped on my wheel for a spin because that's where I do my best thinking. If there's one thing that gets a classroom hamster thinking, it's a problem happening right in his own classroom. Harry's Rules of School. It's easy to get your wiggles out, but it's harder to shake your problems away. I hope you guys enjoyed that chapter and keep reading along with us. See you later.